Well, good evening. Back again for another tackle talk. We'll see how this goes. I've got a lot to cover, not a lot of time. Turns out being a parent requires some attention. So anyway, I'm gonna dive right in and talk about some of my late fall selections. And by late fall, I mean like the later part of October through like the end of November. Obviously, use your best judgment as to what goes with which. I'll kind of like detail some of my choices with that as things go on, and hopefully I can categorize these baits in ways that it will make sense as I kind of roll through them. Anyway, without diving too much into it, pun intended, you know, fall is diving rice time. Fall is time for your stuff like your Suics, your Navins, your Buckos, those kinds of things. So without too much to do with that, I'm just gonna dive right in. So one of my fall baits that I will go to regularly is a Suic. This is just a 10-incher. I don't have any hooks on it. This one is a battle beast, as you can tell. I gotta do some work to it. It's taking on a little too much water and it sinks. So, I mean, that's just part of the deal. God forbid we catch enough fish on wooden baits that they make them sink. So, I've gotta pay some attention to that one, figure out how to get it not to sink, or just get a new Suic. Oh well, whatever. So that's one of the first ones for the diving rice. Moving on, we've got the 10-inch Bucko. Again, I'll probably be throwing Buckos 8-inchers some as well. It's just one of those things where having those larger profiles in the fall can sometimes be advantageous. You know, those fish are looking for bigger meals, they're looking for more caloric value, more caloric bang for their caloric buck. So again, they've got to put on the pounds. They know that the season is coming. Despite the fact that we had 90 degrees last weekend here in September, it doesn't matter. Those fish are looking to chew. And things may be tough, it's whatever, but that's one of Bucko's 10-inch selections. Speaking of Bucko, here's a 12-inch selection from him that I will likely be throwing this fall some as well. I've got a perch pattern one that I'll probably throw more than this one, just because it kind of looks like more things forage-wise here where I fish. I mean, if I was going to fish the Iowa Great Lakes, I would probably make sure to have this one along with me. There's plenty of pike that they eat up there. But for the lakes that I fish around here, his brown perch one is much better for me personally. If I was to fish in the Northwoods, pike pattern for sure, but I'm not in the Northwoods, unfortunately. I don't get to see all the colors change up there, which is kind of sad, but I digress. One of these days I'll be up there in the fall and it will be awesome. Moving on, a chaos selection, the 12-inch Navin. This is something that I throw in the fall as well. Something to note, you're gonna have to weight these down a little bit. They have the weight insert for screw-in weights or whatever you choose. You may want to put one up here as well. These 12-inch Navins are great. They move a ton of water. They displace all kinds of things. They go side to side. They roll a ton. But again, they're very buoyant. So just understand that when you're chucking them, you're gonna have to weight them down some. It's not a big deal. If it's rising really fast, there's nothing wrong with the bait. You just gotta put a little bit more weight in it. All right, moving on to my next selection, glide baits. Similar to the spring, glide baits can be very effective in the fall in colder temps. Here I've got a Codiac blunt nose. You've seen it before, you'll see it again. These things are great at getting down in the zone into where those fish are just a little bit deeper. The blunt nose is especially good at this. It just tends to run a little bit more in that 6-foot-ish range, 4-foot-ish range. Most glides don't get down into that range, but these ones do. So that's something that I will be running later in the fall as well. For more shallow fall situations with gliders or things that, or types of structure that I want to work to keep the glider up a little bit, some submerged timber, weeds, whatever the case may be, I'll probably lean on the shum from Chaos a little bit more. These ones tend to hang a little bit higher in the water column, and you know, they get the job done up there. They've got pretty good body roll, they work really easy. They're just really cool baits. They're easy to work, they're easy to use, especially in those colder water temps. They're just great. So moving on, kind of piggybacking, I'm trying to do this in a logical progression here that makes a lot of sense, and kind of time wise with the progression of the fall also makes sense. But anyway, moving on to kind of the Twitch program that I will be running. We've got, as always, the Ridgway Customs. This is going to be the time where I'm going to be moving more towards the 10-inch than really any other time in the year. The way that he weights these newer ones with like the lip reinforcer, they're going to get a little deeper, they're going to suspend a little bit longer. His older models, they tend to run a little shallower, they don't get quite as deep. Those are great for September, early October, but once you start getting into the later part of October, these newer models that are weighted a little bit better, or a little bit heavier, excuse me, are a lot better to be running in those depths. So this is going to be a staple when it comes to later in the season, something that's going to move a ton of water. It's going to have a huge profile, it's going to sit down there, and it's just going to suspend. Speaking of suspending, it's almost like playing this out or something. We've got Adam's Dipstick XL from Topline Baits. This thing is just stupid. It's just stupid. I mean, the foil, the pattern, the walleye, the everything, it's just gonna get absolutely crushed down there. His baits are really, really good at getting down into that 8 to 10 foot range where a lot of baits aren't able to get to. They sit there and they suspend. My camera can't even focus because it's throwing off so much flash, which I absolutely love because I think that that draws fish in that clear to semi-clear water in from a really, really long ways away. So again, the Topline Baits Dipstick XL, gonna be a staple. It's gonna catch fish. These things freaking rock. I realize not everyone is able to get those as easily as I am able to get them, but if you can ever get your hands on a dipstick, do not hesitate. Those things are awesome. So in the fall transition, sometimes slow rolling baits horizontally is a great approach. This is the Musky Mayhem Supermodel. It's double 13s. These things move a ton of water, push a ton of water. I've actually had some semblance of success in that turnover period with those. Normally the turnover period can be very, very difficult. I'm not saying it's a foolproof plan, but I've had some luck on the supermodels. They've been good to me. It's not one of those things where when I'm fishing them, I'm burning them in. I'm just kind of slow rolling them in, really just getting those blades to turn, and just kind of slow rolling it in, giving it some pulses here and there. So supermodel's a great one later in the fall just to push some water, give them a big presentation, a big profile to look at, and hopefully get it bit. Another one that's really good and for that slow rolling presentation and profile is the Chaos Poseidon. Especially late in the fall, I feel like this is a better selection. Mostly because the Poseidons tend to run a little deeper, they tend to thump a little harder than some of the other swim baits on the market. That's not to say that those other swim baits are bad. I just think that this is a time in the year where the Poseidon really shines. The other time that I think that the Poseidon really shines is during that open water period. Again, it's all about depth. It's about getting your bait into the zone and knowing where that zone is at. If you've got a bait that can just kind of get down there a little bit better than the swim dogs or the shallow swimming dogs, you know, that's going to be critical to getting more bites this time of year. Transitioning from rubber to rubber. So another staple for me in the fall, without a doubt, is the Medusa. Now this happens to be a regular one, and you're probably like, Matt, why do you not have a Husky? Well, that's because both of the Huskies that I have are in my boat. And huskies are definitely something that I will be throwing this fall. Also, don't be afraid to chuck the mids. I throw the mids plenty this time of year. I actually caught one on Halloween weekend a couple years ago on a mid. You know, it's just one of those things where that profile, you know, it gives them something to look at, it gives them something to target, it gets down in the zone and allows those fish to key in on something that's moving a ton of water in their area. So again, the Medusa is one that I will lean on heavily in the later fall period for sure. Speaking of suspending, hanging in the zone, this is the time of the year that I'll probably throw a toad more than any other time. Sometimes in the spring, but in the fall, the toad shines. It's got a lot of hang time. It offers kind of a different profile than some of those other baits. You know, as well as the B52 that has a lot of hang as well, but I have so much confidence in the toad. The toad does really well for me in Wisconsin in kind of that open water post-spawn transition period. I've actually caught one of my biggest muskies in Iowa on a toad, so they definitely work. That muskie was a very rewarding catch. It's one of those things where we were coming off of a cold front, we had high blue skies, and it was one of those deals where we got one bite and one fish, and it was the right fish. If you're gonna get one bite in a day, getting a bite from a 47.5 is the bite that you want. Anyway, the toad is definitely one that we will be running plenty this fall. Another bait that I will probably be running some this fall as well is the Ryan Painter Customs Hellcat. This thing is awesome. It's got a lot of suspend to it. It moves a ton of water. That tail pushes just an absolute ton of water down there. We've got natural patterns. We've got you know, not so natural patterns. It's just one of those baits that I feel like around here the fish don't see a ton, and it's got really good hang time. It's a lot like that B52. It kind of gets down in the zone, it hangs there, it does its thing, and hopefully the fish will agree. But I know people down south catch plenty of fish on these things. I'm still waiting on my first with one, but hopefully we can change that this fall. They're too cool not to throw. They look like a bullhead, and I know that muskies eat bullheads and catfish here all the time. All right, so transitioning from plastic to more plastic, but later in the fall season, we've got our jigging baits. Here is a Bondi, just an absolute staple, and then I've got the Poseidon Pegasus. Again, I know that the Pegasus is not necessarily a jigging bait, I just use it for that application at times. I've also straight retrieved it. I know that that's what it was designed for, similarly to like running like a bigger rattle trap. But again, I pulled a brine scaife, put the blade attachment on there for jigging. It's one that I will go to lean on, as well as the Bondi for those times where we're gonna jig. I don't do a ton of jigging down here, mostly because that time where the jigging program is best coincides with waterfowl season, so it's like, you know, I'd rather hunt ducks and put some flying ribeyes in the freezer. But at the same time, if I'm able to get out and do some jigging, again, a lot of times when I'm jigging, I'm with Barry. Barry's got live scope. Live scope makes it about 10 times easier to find those fish, stay on the fish, and know what's going on down there. But regardless, they're muskies. They're not always the most cooperative, but they're always a ton of fun. So that's just kind of my rundown, more or less, of the different fall baits that I'm going to use. And yes, there are times where you could maybe throw a topwater walk the dog, or slow roll a flap tail. Whatever the case is for topwater, I just don't have a ton of confidence in it after September. I know that there are windows, I know that there are times where it works, but this more or less in front of me here is going to be the baits that I will lean on most in that later fall period. And by that I mean like mid-October to the end of November. But anyway, if you enjoy the Tackle Talk, please let me know. Leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. If you want more tackle talks, I'm sure I can come up with more on the way. I've got one coming up for some baits that I'm getting from Canada, which are really cool and really unique. And then, you know, I'll have some throughout the winter. I've got a giveaway coming up that I'm very excited about, that I've had a lot of positive response from builders on. So I'm really excited once I get all the baits here to get that out to all of you. But anyway, with that being said, good luck on the water this fall. I hope you guys absolutely crush a giant. This is the time to do it. So good luck out there, and I'll catch you all in the next one.